There is a place forever summer, where the seas rise and fall to the timing of one's breath. Though still, storms may churn the waters sometimes, but mostly just for fun.
She will be there too, and all your unholy friends, saved only by the cosmic play, engraved within their hearts, singing like birds, laughing like thunder, smiling like lightning, only as good sinners do.
Stall not at the bank of the Styx, fear not the coming gloom. There is one last sailor's voyage through one last raging storm, for in the end it is merely begun, and if you could, you would do it again, but mostly just for fun.
So over the last couple of weeks, I've received a lot of viewer questions, and I thought it would be a good idea to address a couple of those on the air. And so what I feel like doing going forward is if you have questions that you'd like me to address or answer or comments that you'd like to have aired on the podcast, what I will do is you send them to me through a message and I will Muppetize a version of you asking the question on the podcast. So it'll be kind of fun. You'll see a Muppet version of yourself asking me the question, and I will do my best to give my opinion or my answer on the subject. So we have a good show for you today. I've got Lauri Pagano, LCSW, here to talk about mental health awareness and her work in that field as a school counselor and a therapist. It's a great interview. You won't want to miss that. But here we're going to start out with me answering a couple of viewer questions. Enjoy.
Given your work in mindfulness, which focuses on non-judgment and being present, how do you reconcile that with what many see as the highly judgmental and often divisive nature of modern progressive activism, especially in the arts?
Being present doesn't just mean being still and calm, or not angry, or not messed up by what you see going on in the world. We have to feel the things that are going on when we're present and process those feelings and know what they stem from. And so when there's injustice in the world, be present, non-judgmental does not mean you don't speak out. Doesn't mean you don't act. It's just being objective. You take the information that you have at your disposal and you evaluate it. You think about it. You reflect upon it and how it relates to you and the world around you. Just as we have to discern our own actions to know if they're going to hurt someone else or infringe upon someone else's rights. That's to be objective and to be present. To be present with not only our own needs, hopes, and desires, but to be present with the needs, hopes, and desires of others as well. Take the example of the rights of gay marriage. Many on the right call it an abomination. They don't agree with it. It's not right in the eyes of God, or however they want to frame it. It does not impact their life, but yet their legislation against the rights of others does impact others' lives. And that's the difference. I can be objective and say, I feel that that's a wrong attitude to have by my own experience, my own understanding of the world and how I feel about it. But objectively, I'm not going to stop you or try to stop you from thinking or believing the way you wish to believe or think. What I will try to stop is you enforcing that by law so that others can enjoy the same freedoms and pursuit of happiness that you enjoy. That's the difference. It's that being principled in oneself, if you truly believe what you believe, then choose not to be gay. You don't have to force others by law or threat or ridicule or mocking or threatening to send them to hell, which is very divisive. You have to decide for yourself what you feel your values and virtues and beliefs are in this world. And believe what you want. But when in terms of faith or belief or understandings that marginalize people, that other them, that push them outside or to the fringes of society because they upset your sensibilities, when all you are personally called to do is don't act upon these things yourself. And so objectively, by letter of the law, and the basis of freedom for everyone, regardless of race, creed, gender, or otherwise, it is my obligation to speak out and say, you can't legislate against someone else's freedom. You can believe what you want to believe. You're allowed to. That this society is full of the manifestations of your beliefs, your policies, your agendas, and your faith system. No one's infringing upon that. Other people existing do not threaten your way of life, other than you don't have as big a club as you used to have. And then it's not about you or your beliefs or values or virtues. It's about belonging to something, which it's fine to belong to things, but that shouldn't be the grand motivator of your seeking of truth or goodness or justice. So I don't find it judgmental to fight against those who are forcing their beliefs, their ideologies, their own moral code on others. Society is built from a common law, an understanding of things that are provable and understandable in the physical world that we know for sure are wrong or right in this moment. We all know it's not okay to murder, to steal, to lie, all of those things. But where the line is drawn is not everybody believes it's wrong to be gay or to be transgender or to be a different race or faith system. Those are subjective. Those are not objective things. The things that cannot be proven are the things we cannot legislate. We have to experience. We have to watch it play out in the real world, real observation, including science and pragmatism. So that we can say, well, we've seen this happen in society and this is what happens. Therefore, we should legislate and help prevent or endorse or whatever happens to be the issue. But when people's happiness, people's pursuit of their dreams, their desires, their hopes that aren't hurting anyone else, when those things are at stake, it would be wrong of me to sit quietly on my yoga mat and just wait for the rest of the world to realize. And that is being present, not just to yourself. We have this sense, I think, even in American spirituality or mindfulness practice or meditation, because of the American culture, that it is about your peace and your peace alone. And that anyone who's angry or frustrated or going through something or their life is a mess or whatever, it's not enlightened. That's not the case. And it goes for the Abrahamic faiths too. I know in Christianity, the poor get looked down on a lot because, well, maybe they're not in God's grace. God hasn't blessed them. They're doing something wrong. We have an idolization of the rich in this culture. It's just about understanding where those feelings come from. I'm angry, not because I'm an angry person. I'm angry because I see injustice and I see people suffering everywhere, even political adversaries. They're suffering. We all have our suffering. And that's why I find it incredibly important to be kind and loving. And that's where non-judgment comes. And that's what inspires true presence to love the world that you're in, to love the things that you do and the people that surround you is a grand motivator to be present, to involve yourself in life, to feel and to grow and to hurt sometimes and to be confused at times, to find great realization later. That is the sense of objectivity that opens oneself with a curious mind to the world, to enjoy it, to celebrate it, not to fear it and to fear things that are different. We see in nature an innumerable amount of species on the planet, and within those species, innumerable manifestations of a horse, the many different colors of a cat, a field of wildflowers, many different colors, many different types and shapes. But yet, when it comes to our interpersonal relationships and community building, we can't handle diversity for some reason. Some are scared of it. So, I am not scared of your belief system. I am concerned when you try to enforce it by law on everyone who do not ascribe to it. As far as art being divisive, it always was. The Renaissance era of great art and science pushed us out. The Dark Age created a new world, new thought, a new way forward. Artists were provocative, they always have been. To create art, you have to feel a bit free to put whatever on the canvas or whatever medium you're using with no regard to the outcome of it. To let it play out on the canvas or on the page or on the sheet or through the instrument. When that happens, things can be created that you didn't force, that you didn't manipulate, that you didn't have an agenda for. Symbols come out, symbolism, themes, images you didn't intend to put on the canvas are there and have some sort of meaning, at least to the artist and maybe to someone else viewing it. And within that, working with that sense of freedom, if you have something to say, you try to say it. And sometimes it comes out in extreme forms, in caricatures or over the top visuals, or stark contrasts that can be irreverent or purposeful. And it's not that divisive art would be a specifically leftist, liberal thing. And so that's the disingenuous part of the question, is it's all slanted toward why the left, why liberals are so divisive. And that is not true on so many levels. Setting boundaries for oneself and for one's freedoms is not infringing upon another. Because you believe a certain way, you don't just get to do what you want with no regard to how it affects the lives of others. That's why there's debate and conversation and legislation and a process. But this idea of someone else's lifestyle or someone else's personal choices affecting your own outside of obvious violence, physical, verbal, or otherwise, theft, fraud, or all of the other common laws we all know are properly to be enforced. These laws based on philosophy on how one should conduct their private lives or express themselves in public that don't hurt anyone. That's where the line's drawn. That's not okay. It's taking it way too far. And so I don't find it divisive to set a boundary against a bully. I don't find it divisive to say no to really bad ideas or bigotry, prejudice. I find it important, and I find it the very essence of being present to acknowledge things are wrong and in good faith try to make the world a little better. But thank you very much for your question.
Hi, Rob. I've been following your work from your wrestling days to your current art and meditation work. It seems like you're trying to balance the intense, competitive nature of athletics with the stillness of meditation and the emotional expression of poetry. I guess my question is, how do you balance the warrior and the poet within yourself?
Well, that's very cool of you. I really appreciate you keeping tabs on me throughout the different projects that I've been involved in over a lot of years now. Wrestling seems like a million years ago. I do want to say I'm going to have a show coming up with a good friend of mine and my arch nemesis, Corey Chappell, who was the Carolina bad boy and was out of Elkin, North Carolina. And I'm really looking forward to having him on the show and revisiting those days. And there's a lot that, I I don't reflect on it as much as I should probably. Uh, but balancing that warrior inside and that peaceful part of myself, that the desire for competition and pushing oneself physically, and then stretching oneself in a totally different way inwardly more peacefully. There, I think I'd realized there's not a whole lot of difference to it in the way I approached things. I was always very grounded, logical, and um, well regulated, almost to a fault. Um, Wrestling allowed me to let go of my inhibitions a little bit, allowed me to push myself. It allowed me to do it in a way that was tapping into that athletic side, that physical side of myself. And then also, I got to be the poet in a sense, as you put it. That's more obvious in writing and art, that side of myself. But it was present there in the former gig too, because it was about storytelling, and I could be a character. I could go out and be a villain. I always loved the villains. They were the most fun. They were the ones that just intrigued me, and you wanted to see them get beat up. You wanted to see them get torn limb from limb by the good old the good guy, the the baby face. But for me, sports and wrestling, and it is it's athletic endeavor, but it's a show, but it requires a great amount of physicality and the willingness to kind of sacrifice your body. I wrestled many years and I didn't have health insurance when I wrestled, and jumping off of ladders and falling onto concrete and rings and taking boots to the face and all those things without a chance of maybe seeing a doctor afterward if I needed to. And luckily nothing had happened. And I made it through relatively unscathed. There were probably some low grade concussions that weren't addressed, I think. Um, but all in all, I made it out okay. But I got to express that physical side of myself. And there was that warrior within that pushed through in the gym and the diet and everything else. And it became very, very focused on my physical side. But I was exercising the creative mind because I was coming up with promos and ways to promote myself, or ways to tell a story, or ways to get the crowd's attention and um, make sure that they got their money's worth and it made sense and they had a reason to hate me or love me, or all the things that go on in that sort of thing. And it was a good place to channel a lot of childhood dreams, a lot of feelings of inadequacy, anger inside of not being enough in a certain way, based on my upbringing, based on experiences I had long before I was an adult. And so it was a proving ground to myself that was very tangible in that physical way. I saw improvement in the gym. I see muscle being built, or me getting stronger, faster, more flexible, more capable. I saw myself grow in the ring, being more technically gifted as I went on. And I got to see tangible results of, oh wow, I can do this. I can achieve the things that I wanted to achieve on a very physical level. Um, that helped me engage in life and feel a part of it, while very much using my mind. So I think the only thing that's changed now, and I still work out pretty seriously and consistently, but not like I used to, because it's a totally different thing. And I'm older now. I don't need to lift a truck. I just need to be able to carry the groceries in. It's not really a big deal. So um it's more about health and being connected to my body as I practice yoga, weight training, cardio exercise. And it's just different than doing it for a purpose, doing it because I have to look a certain way in spandex to do what I want to do. That I love beyond the weight room, that I love beyond just looking a certain way or feeling a certain way or being able to perform a certain way. It was about setting the stage to tell a story. It was about looking the part. It was about, but it did become over focus at some point. It was it was a grind, and there were a lot of days when you don't feel you're big enough, strong enough, or look the part enough. There's pressure on that because you want to do what you love to do, and that's a big part of it. And so I had to really step back and assess, do I have a healthy outlook on my physicality? And I found for the most part I had, but it could be a preoccupation. And that there were times I overworked. There were times I didn't allow myself enough rest. There was definitely an imbalance happening at times during that career. And so I found it very important to find that balance, that harmony. And even though that's an important part of myself and a big aspect of myself, it wasn't the all of me. And so then I went in the completely opposite direction and lived very much like a monk for probably 13, 14 years. And didn't do much of anything publicly. So, you keeping up on the wrestling and then now the art and the mindfulness, well, thank you. That's a long haul. And I disappeared for quite a while, trying to go on an inward healing journey with all of the curiosities that I've had since a child, some experiences that I wanted to know more about. I'm glad to have Lauri Pagano here on Oh the Humanity. Welcome, Lauri. How are you today?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm trying to stay cool in this one almost 100-degree heat. How are you?
Well, I'm all right. And I've got 39-degree, not heat, but temperature here in New York. So you're in Arizona.
Yeah, I'm in Phoenix, Arizona.
I'm glad you can make
Yeah,
it.
I'll swap you. I'll
Yeah.
swap you. It's a little too much for this time of year.
I'll take it. I would take 100-degree heat over anything below 55, I think is where I start to get uncomfortable. I think I could do it.
That sounds pretty reasonable.
Well, you're doing some great work with bringing some mental health awareness in the work that you do. You're working as a social worker in a school system. So, what have you noticed about adolescent mental health awareness that has changed from when we were in high school?
Mental health awareness among adolescents has really drastically increased since we were in high school in the 90s. These kids are accessing mental health care at much faster rates than we ever did. They're having very open and honest conversations surrounding mental health. They're looking at TikToks, Instagram. They're so much more aware of their own internal mental state than I think that we ever were. They're having open and honest conversations even amongst themselves. Their friends, they're talking so openly about these things that didn't even exist when we were in high school.
Well, that brings me into the next question, actually. How do you feel today's students viewed neurodivergence among their peers and within themselves?
I think it's more widely accepted. And I think the full spectrum of autism spectrum disorder and neurodivergency and ADHD is so commonly talked about. And the thing about it is that they'll still pick on each other, they'll still tease each other, there's still some bullying, and that's never gone away. But I think it's just because of their developmental age group. They're going to do those things anyway. Their prefrontal cortexes aren't quite online yet until they develop that really good empathy on how to treat each other. But there's a lot more acceptance. And I think, like, overall, especially within education, we see a lot more education about how autism shows up.
How do you feel your school system is handling any bullying or negative uh, pushback or interactions between students as a result of it?
My school district, and specifically, I think handles it really well. We have a zero tolerance policy towards bullying. We are able to mediate between students. I've been a mediator between students. We implement things like no contact contracts, which are kind of like a teenage version of a restraining order while they're in school. And it
Nice.
actually even covers when they're outside of school or when they're online or even talking amongst their friends. So it's actually like, I believe I'm a little biased, but I believe that my school district does a pretty good job for the most part. I think sometimes it does, unfortunately, fly a little under the radar. But when we do get wind of it and kids start talking to us about their experiences with their peers that aren't as positive, they usually rope in an adult, and they're really good about that. And yeah, and then we have the opportunity to really do some restorative care with them.
How how do you help students deal with online bullying and things like that?
That's a really good question. Sometimes it's not brought to our attention, or at least my attention, until another student starts talking about what's going on. It's usually they'll bring it to me, to my desk, and go like, "Hey, listen, there's something happening with this other student. They're being really mean." And then once it's brought to my attention, or it's brought to the attention of a teacher or another adult, I'll usually sit down with the student, try to gain their perspective about what's happening, and then I usually like to address it, either with my principal, or we can do like we would do some mediation, those no contact contracts, and just really sit down with them and try to understand both sides, or just to put in some really strong boundaries. And it's not just enough for just me as another adult to tell them what to do and what not to do. I don't really like to do that. What I really like to do is try to get the other party to recognize why it's not a good thing, why it's very hurtful and impactful, and why, words really do matter with people, and why they can really cut us deep.
I like that. So, how do you best foster an environment where the feel free and safe to talk about some of these negative interactions or any bullying or any pressure they're getting from their peers?
Well, I'm a huge believer in trauma informed care and just providing an environment where you support them and love them no matter what they're doing. Teenagers are going to teenage. They're going to make poor decisions. They're going to, cop you an attitude. They're going to talk back. They're going to fight. They're going to do all these other things. And they're going to do some really great positive things. But no matter what, we should be the adults that are,
Right.
you know, always like looking out for their best interest and creating those safe spaces where they're able to talk to us confidentially, where, we're not going to just talk about anything that they're talking about. Like, you have to create that culture of trust and just be kind. There are, unfortunately, some teachers out there that aren't kind to students, and that can really go a long way and make or break a school culture.
I can hear that. I That's very validating to me. You mean teachers maybe have been in the wrong in the past at times? That's makes me feel
Yes.
better about my own school experience, I guess.
It's enlightening, isn't it? Like, it
Yeah.
makes me look back on my own experiences and go like, "Wait a second, it didn't have to be that way." We should have been more supported by some individuals, and I think it was especially more common in earlier, like, later years, I should say, that there was more of a hard line approach to education, and now we're coming to find a more trauma-informed approach to educating students that's more welcoming, more that just embraces all parts of them.
Yeah. As diverse as people are, is as diverse as their learning, abilities, their learning styles. And it's important to know that.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned earlier about they have access to all of this information online that we didn't have necessarily back in the day. What concerns do you have about misinformation or them diagnosing themselves?
There is so much misinformation out there that I frequently have to debunk and debunk in front of large groups of students at once. Unfortunately, a lot of kids get their information from TikTok. They get a lot of their information from Instagram, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it's correct just because somebody else is um, putting a reel out there about mental health. Yeah, unfortunately, it's misinformation. I don't know how many opportunities there are that it is misinformation or the percentage of time that it's ill-informed, but they're getting this information. And then they either come to me and talk about, well, I don't want you to tell my parent that I'm self-harming because I don't want this to happen. I don't want that to happen. And I was like, wait a second. I worked with the seriously mentally ill for about 13 years, and I've worked in hospitals, I've worked in crisis settings, and I'm like, let's have some real talk about this. Like, you're not going to be put in a straitjacket.
Right.
They're not going to just jab you with a needle. And I'm like, where are you getting this information? And a lot of times it's from TikTok. And then that's where, like, as a social worker who works in education says, well, let's use our critical thinking skills. And the next time you're seeking information out there, where can you find good cited information? And we'll name things like NAMI, Mayo Clinic, all those other really good, well sourced, factual bits of information out there. And about the diagnoses, this is an interesting thing because the maybe not necessarily the downside of having more mental health information out there is sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not so great, is that then what we call armchair diagnosing. And they'll go online and they'll be like, well, I'm super anxious all the time. And they'll look it up and like, I have generalized anxiety disorder. Hey, miss, I think I have oppositional defiant disorder or all these other like highly technical clinical diagnoses. It's a huge book, and these kids are sometimes accessing it. And I was like, okay, so let's slow down. You need a qualified mental health clinician to help you navigate the huge tome that is the DSM 5 TR.
Right.
Like, let's slow down a little bit. Appreciate that you're doing this. I appreciate you're investigating your own mental health. But there's a downside to that because then all of a sudden, by the time we know it, somebody has schizophrenia or somebody has major depressive disorder when they actually don't. So it's a lot of appreciation for the thirst of knowledge that they do have about their own mental health and the mental health of others. But then it's also a lot of debunking myths and a lot of debunking information and just having these kids slow down because it can also lead to an increase in anxiety. Like all of a sudden they have this, really, you know, this mental health condition that carries a really big stigma to it. And they're doing it on their own. And I think it's even more prevalent at the school that I'm at.
What is your main concern with our culture's perceptions of mental health and getting therapy?
There still isn't quite as much buy in as there should be. I feel like most people, especially older generations, are still trying to tough it out, won't ask for help.
Right.
And it's really hard to do that because we need to normalize asking for help. None of us can really do it alone. Like, I can't even do it alone. I myself have therapy, and it's been such a valuable tool for me. And like, we should normalize it more. I mean, we're farther along than we ever used to be, but we're still not quite there. And I think the biggest bit of evidence for this is how we don't value mental health care and mental health workers, clinicians, providers, behavioral health technicians, all the people who are in the trenches trying to improve the mental health care of everybody, trying to improve people with mental illnesses, um, and all sorts of mental health concerns. Uh, we're not paid enough and we're not funded enough. And that isn't just a plug for more pay, but that's just,
We'll put up a
it really does.
GoFundMe link in
Yeah,
the show. Yeah.
go fund me, go fund my pocketbook. But it's not just about that, because you do see value in dollar signs. Our society really does.
Yeah.
And if there isn't that value with the monetary aspect or funding aspect with mental health care, it really does have a trickle down effect, because then the burnout rates of clinicians and mental health providers skyrockets. They're not getting the pay that they should. They're not getting the time off that they should to deal with the burnout rate.
Right.
And that really affects the patients. It affects the patient's ability to get consistent mental health care, because what ends up happening is, say for instance, if you have a serious mental illness and you see a case manager or a mental health worker, usually if you're seeing a new person every 6 months or more, it is so hard to develop a connection with that person, develop a connection of safety, develop a connection of trust. And that does really erode um, mental health overall.
Yeah, from compassion fatigue to understaffing, it's really hard to have the help available for people that are seeking it or are in situations or systems that provide it. So I understand especially generationally, the idea of toughing it out or grinding through it. And I think that, when we have a broken arm, it's so tangible. It hurts in very real time. It doesn't fade into the background in the subconscious or anything else. It is throbbing, it is
Mhm.
hurting, it needs immediate care. And I think we can more easily identify with that. But with something as abstract with the mind, and if we haven't been someone who's been overly introspective or know how to really observe our mind, we might just think everything's going along fine. We just need to gut through it, push through it. What is your advice for those that maybe think everything's okay or think that there's not a value in finding therapy? Like you said, you participate in therapy yourself. I do as well. Like, it should be normalized. How do we help people become more comfortable with seeking help just as they would with any other medical doctor?
I think the thing about it is, yes, the mind is abstract, but the mind is also a very solid, tangible thing. It is a major organ of the body. The body cannot function without the brain. There's so many things that are attached to our brain and our nervous systems and different parts of the brain that regulate all sorts of different parts of the body. It is a major organ of the body. And I think we take it for granted a lot of times. And I want people to think of it this way: at least once in our lives, at least, there is a point where we'll need help. We'll need help with somebody who's non biased, who's going to listen to us, who's going to try to guide us through. Because I'm a therapist and I'm a school social worker and I know my own medicine. and I know what to do, but at the same time, when it's you yourself, like it's you're too inside of the problem.
Right.
You need somebody who's kind of like outside of you to help guide you through those moments. Because even with me, like I know all the theories and I know how to help somebody if it's not me. But when it's me, it's a lot harder because, it's too close to the problem that I'm having. It's too close to me. And going back to the brain as being a major organ of the body, it's like, listen, if you're if something was happening to your pancreas, if something was happening to your heart, would you not see a doctor for that? Would you not get help if you had high blood pressure or high blood sugar? Like, yes, of course, you would see a specialist for that. You would take the proper medication. And and I think that's a really important thing for all of us to remember is that we do need to tend to those things. And also to remember, if we want to get really technical about it, the brain is made up of innumerable amounts of neurons and chemicals that travel in between those neurons. And those neurons send electrical signals to other parts of neurons in the brain. So is it really that abstract? Because we experience a lot of responses we experience, a lot of emotion, the emotions that we experience are basically boiled down to a chemical that we can gauge and we can keep track of. So if we want to get super technical, sometimes I like to do that. It's like, okay, this is an argument that I like to try to win.
I like that. That objectivity is very powerful, and that's what we need. Like, I'm not technically inclined. I can't pop the hood of my car and dive into the computer system and fix it myself. So I'm definitely not going to do that with my brain. And I think
Right.
that's a very important message. So, with knowing the theories, the processes yourself, how
Mhm.
difficult is it for you to be a patient and not a therapist? How do you separate the two? And do you find that there's any challenge of just being there, or do you find yourself trying to keep yourself away from the therapist role for yourself during your sessions or in your reflections or anything like that?
So are you talking about when I'm with my therapist or if I'm
Yes,
just it's just
like
is this
yourself, like a therapist with their therapist. Are you able to step out of that
oh,
role and step away from your knowledge for a moment to kind of allow yourself that unbiased approach or almost a curious mind approach to your own therapy?
I would say most of the time, yes, I'm able to do that. And it's because like when it's my own stuff, I don't always have the answers. And I know the theories, but I know that I need to step away from it because if I'm trying to run the show, number one, that's annoying. Number two, it's it doesn't take me any further than I'm already at that point. And I need to go further than what I'm doing for myself. And like I'll do things like journal. I'll do things like meditation. I'll do some of the little tricks of the trade as to say, but for the most part, I'm able to kind of step back from the process and let the therapist just, do their thing. And you would think that we would make really bad patients. I like to think that I'm a good patient. I don't know, maybe there are therapists out there that aren't the best patients because of that particular reason, because there's always one, of course, there's always one.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, there's always that one person. But yeah, like I do try to step back for the most part and let the other person just kind of have their perspective on my problem and give me some things that I can do. I think the positive thing is, and I've actually been told this by other providers, especially in mental health, is that they don't have to explain too much to me because I'm already meeting them there, and I've never really encountered another provider who that was like a bad thing, a bad thing.
Right.
I'm actually able to understand a little bit more on a deeper level. Like if they throw out like a clinical word or something like that, they don't usually have to explain it to me, which I feel like that could be kind of refreshing, so to say.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
a good approach. Then I'm glad you're able to do that. Now, recently you've shared your own diagnosis of synesthesia. And as you hope to raise mental health awareness overall, what is synesthesia?
So synesthesia, and I had to learn more about this myself. It is basically the blending of neurological senses. For instance, if we've ever heard of anybody out there who was able to smell colors or see shapes when they hear music, those are just a couple of examples of several different types of synesthesia.
And not a Burning Man experience. You're not talking about like
No.
some sort of, right, right. Gotcha.
No, no, not a Burning Man experience. No, definitely not.
So then it's not that. Well, how can you describe your experience?
So I currently have two definable types. One's called number form synesthesia, and the other is called spatial sequence synesthesia. Um, Spatial sequence synesthesia means that I see things in a specific order in space. For instance, I see the yearly calendar at once, and it follows a specific, very loose spiral pattern. Um, Apparently, this isn't normal. And I was educated of this last year, and I'll go into that a little bit more. But
Mhm.
the other one that I have is number form, which means that I can see um, numbers 0 through 300 all at once, and it follows a specific unchangeable pattern. So the thing with synesthesia and these specific types is that they don't change their pattern. Um, they don't if there's colors involved, they don't change colors. But this is how I experience it. And actually, when I was little, I had something called ordinal linguistic personification. And I didn't know that this wasn't typical of children, but so basically what ordinal linguistic personification is, kind of like if you understand a little bit of ideology or Latin, it basically means that you're attributing personalities, faces, looks to something like numbers and letters. And at that time, it's resolved for the most part. But when I was little, numbers and letters had these intricate lives. They had drama between each other. They were neighbors. They were lovers. They were parents, almost like watching a soap opera, but with numbers and letters. And I think that this actually helped me learn letters even more and maybe to learn how to read. But unfortunately, number form synesthesia didn't teach me math any better.
It's like your own form of Schoolhouse Rock right there in your head.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. That's
So when you
exactly what it was
say
like.
you see all of like 0 to 300 all at once, walk us through that, whatever's going on visually for you, the visualization process of that. Does it come on all at once? All of a sudden you're transported to that space in your mind?
So I can kind of manipulate. It's like on a field. It's on a white field, gray letters in 3D. And I can usually kind of zoom out, like almost as if like I'm flying over it. But what's more readily available to me in my mind's eye is that I'm standing right next to number 0 through 5. And then it goes on in like an upward trajectory up until number 19, and then number 20 is stacked right next to number 10. And then that form and sequence continues, that stacking kind of continues all up away into like number 300. So I can kind of like look over it at the same time. Um, it's almost as if like 0 through 20, they're bigger numbers. And it's just it's a specific stacked pattern with the rest of the numbers, if that makes any sense. Sometimes
It
it's a
does.
little hard to yeah.
Yeah, it's I'm sure it's hard to imagine with anyone that doesn't for anyone that doesn't really experience it themselves. But that's fascinating. Now, how has it impacted your life?
I don't really feel like it's had much of an impact considering I didn't even know it wasn't normal until about a year ago when I was 46 years old, and I just happened to have a conversation with my therapist at the time. I don't remember how we got onto the subject, but I'm like, "Hey, listen, I'm experiencing something and I'm Googling it and I'm not really sure what that means." And then so it started down a rabbit hole of, perception, numbers, calendars. My therapist at that time was able to see shapes when she heard music. So it just opened up this whole conversation surrounding visualization and perception and experiences. And she's like, no, that's not really normal. And not to say, and she didn't say it in a mean way,
Right.
but it's just like, no, people don't see numbers and calendars like that. And I was like, really? How do they see them? And I still don't really understand how um, the typical person sees them. I just know how I see them.
Right. It's hard to know what's going on in the experience of someone else's mind. It's and to describe what you're going through, and what you experience, it's really hard to understand it. It's really hard to really unless you experience it yourself, it's like,
Yeah.
I'm not even quite sure how that works or how that happens. But your mind and your process, absolutely normal. It just happens just as a regular thing.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Did
I
it
think that we don't talk about it a lot because either it's just we're used to how we see things. Or I feel like sometimes there is a little bit of fear of judgment from other people. And I
uh
think that's kind of like why we don't really talk about it too much and it isn't as common. It's approximately 5% of the population.
5%. Yeah, it's we have so many strange things going through our mind at any given moment that may seem illogical even to us that it's hard to describe them to other people or open up about the things that just seem either normal or strange, but it's not worth bringing up. What do you remember the moment, like you just said about a year ago? Do you remember the moment where you started to go down the rabbit hole and look these things up and realize, hey, this isn't what everybody's experiencing?
I remember it now. It was a conversation around an experience that I have when something hits my funny bone just the right way. So if somebody says something humorous that's paradoxical or it's ironic, I have always had this very strong convulsive shiver that goes up my back and my arms. And I'm like, okay, this isn't normal. But I couldn't find out any information whatsoever online about it. I was just like, okay, this is very interesting that I can't find anything. And that's when I finally broke down and I was like, hey, so I have a curiosity question. Do you have any idea what's going on? And because I Google was failing me. Like poor Dr. Google didn't have the answers for me at that time. But at that time, she thought it was probably a form of synesthesia. And then that brought us down our little rabbit hole together. And we started talking about more and more things.
Hmm. Well, what's helped you the most really understand synesthesia?
Um, I have asked Google, ChatGPT. It's a very interesting tool, not for like necessarily diagnoses, but for putting in information about your experience. and because it gathers from all sorts of different sources all at once. So it's been really interesting, that to help gather my experiences and thoughts. Um, of course, we should be very careful with any sort of AI, obviously, but I just feel like just investigating things and then having the knowledge of my therapist at that time really helped me just to make sense of everything. And then after we went to, after that session where we went down that rabbit hole, I just really started diving deep into it and investigating it more and doing a lot more research about it.
Mm. Well, it's fascinating, not in a sense to make anyone's mental health journey a curiosity, but I find the mind and all of its expressions absolutely intriguing and mysterious, and something that is such a valuable thing to study and understand, on any level for any person, not even in the scientific field or mental health field, but just everybody to know something about their own mental health, something about psychology that can help them understand themselves a little better. And I want to thank you for sharing your journey and your mental health journey with us here. And it's enlightening for us all to hear such an intriguing and interesting experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much.
No.
It was very good experience just describing sometimes something that's hard to describe.
Yeah. Yeah. It's necessary to try to describe the undescribable at times.
Right.
Well, I think it's a
Yeah.
good place to take a break right now, and we'll be back with more with Lori after this. So we're back with Lori Pagano. What do you love about your work, Lori?
I love working with teenagers. I love working in a high school, even though for the first year of my job, I had constant high school dreams. But I really love seeing them grow and become young adults and to go out there in the world. And I love that I'm able to just give them the tools that they need to be kinder, more productive adults, hopefully with less mental health concerns when they do go out there to work or go to college. It's just really cool to see them during that period of their lives.
Hmm, that's good. Do you think we're getting kinder? Do you think the kids are getting kinder?
Yes and no. I feel like we have this whole kindness movement, but as a whole, I think overall we're not getting kinder. There's there could be many things that attribute to that. Especially they are not kind to each other online. They may be
Right.
kind in person a lot of times, but not usually online. It's harder when you don't have somebody right in front of you to see in real time their reaction, whether their reactions are hurtful or angry or sad. Yeah, I'd love to say that we are getting kinder, but I don't think we are, even with all of these PSAs and movements and positive reels and TikToks and Instagram. Yeah, but I think in
Hmm.
some areas we are, some we're not.
Now, obviously, as you spoke to, that buffer of not being right there with the person. Do you think we have a tendency to be polite but not kind when we're face to face with someone, like kind of as a fear to be impolite? Or do you think that empathy kicks in when we're actually in the presence of another person?
I think it's more that empathy kicks in when we're in front of somebody because we're able to see in real time how something that we're doing or saying is affecting somebody else. Of course, there's always going to be outliers. There are people who, a small percentage of people who don't have empathy, but that's a very small percent. or some people have a harder time accessing empathy than others. Um, but for the most part, with humans, we're able to mirror each other's facial expressions. We're able to co regulate. That's how we regulate our nervous systems. And so it's a lot harder when it's online because we're not seeing that in real time. We're basically forgetting that there's a human being on the other side of the keyboard.
Hmm. Yeah, I think we see that all over the place, you know. But in you're kind of showing a very nuts and bolts way that we can be the change we wish to see in the world by mirroring those facial expressions, those emotions that we're seeing in while we engage with an actual human being. So if we are holding a certain type of space, it's very hard for someone to not want to mirror that back. Correct?
Yeah, it's something that we humans do automatically. When somebody's smiling, we're more likely to smile. If we're walking into a room full of people who are upset, angry, and frowning, we're more likely going to mirror that on our own faces.
Right. Right. So from the time that we were in high school to now, do you think what is the difference in the culture of a high school in general that you've noticed?
I feel like back then, bullying was handled a lot differently. We were pretty much expected to handle it ourselves
Yeah.
and not tell on the other kid, not getting in them trouble. But we're like, yeah, we're just gonna handle this ourselves, like handle the bully and they won't bully you back. And even our parents would tell us like, no, do something, hit them back, make the bully afraid of you. We have swung very much in the other direction. We're very much of the mind of seek an adult if somebody's making your learning space uncomfortable or intolerable. Um, Bullying has been linked to a higher incidence of severe mental health issues, of suicidal ideation. And that's the deeper end of why we want adults to get involved if there are bullies, kids bullying other kids, because that's the real reason why it's not acceptable because it has such huge ramifications for how we feel about ourselves and even some kids' will to live. Even some adults in the workplace, if they're bullied, it's more likely to affect their mental health. It can affect how they see themselves or the world. It shakes up their sense of safety and it can increase their level of suicidal ideation and self harming because we even see that in adults as well. And during the teen years, though, they're still developmentally, they're still learning those things. They're still learning how to have empathy and how to show empathy. And it's just about getting those parts of the brain online for them and showing and modeling those things.
I agree. I think there was a perception among the generation before us that bullying was the kid threatened to beat you up for your lunch money, like a physical bully.
Yeah.
And the old sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me has absolutely been proven untrue. And it's the way people are
Yeah.
treated, the engagement, the words that are used, the names that are called, that's also bullying. Also, it's harassment, and it can lead into all sorts of other
Mhm.
things. And so I think we're learning that
Yeah.
now. But I know very much, like, sticks and stones may break my bone was said so many times while I was growing up by my parents and other adults. Like, get over
Yeah.
it, kid. He didn't beat you up. Like, your
Yeah.
bones aren't broken. It's just words. It's words, but that's
Right.
dangerous. It's incredibly dangerous.
Yeah. Words are dangerous. There have been instances where people have unfortunately taken their own lives because of the words that they received from somebody else. There are documented cases of, the worst case scenarios that you can imagine. I'm not going to dive too much into, where kids were convinced to um, die by suicide because of bullying and the words they were told. Because it really does, like, we can tell ourselves as much as we want that words don't matter.
Right.
No, they matter. Word let's not kid ourselves. Words really do matter. As we as humans, it really does.
Words are powerful. They can uplift and they can tear down. They're a very potent part of our expression, and the negative things that we hear about ourselves stick out and stick with us so much longer than the, oh, I really like that shirt, or I really like the way you played your instrument, or I really like the way you sang or threw the ball, or whatever it is. It's
Yeah.
always the thing that sticks out. Like, why does your hair look like that? Why does that
Yeah.
will stick with us for years and years and years.
Yeah. And I think we can thank negativity bias for that. It's something that we humans are very good at. It's how we survived out in the wild in our early societies, by picking and seeing the things that could harm us first. Like,
Mhm.
we were out there hunting, gathering. We had to see the dangerous things first in order to survive. The thing about how we evolved is that those things didn't quite go away. They just transferred to other sorts of situations. So we
Mhm.
still have those ancient human responses. They just now show up as, um, you know, making a really big dig or an insult on a child by another child. And those things really do stick with us because our brains naturally do that.
Right. Today, it's not the saber-toothed tiger, it's the kid in third period. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's why humans respond by having panic attacks, because, the amygdala, which is our threat detection system, it's our fire alarm, goes off, and it's not the saber-toothed tiger. It is actually another perceived threat that's in our environment. And that could be the exam that we didn't study for, or going outside with two different shoes on. And all of a sudden now we're in a tailspin mentally, and it's just basically transferred.
Absolutely. So what's the most challenging part of your job?
I was thinking about this, and the most challenging part of my job is not being able to take all the pain away. It's seeing heartbreak, um, basically sometimes seeing the worst that can happen to people, like the worst situations, the trauma, the heartbreak, the sadness. Like, I can do certain things about it. Like, if a child's in danger, I can call the authorities. I can call Child Protective Services in order to keep that child safe, especially if it's an imminent thing. I can take measures if the child or anybody else is talking about harming themselves. Like, I do have some control over that as a professional to a certain degree, but it's the things that fall outside of that that's still a part of the condition that's really heartbreaking. And it's the kid that I have so many kids that just don't have a great home life. There's a lot of criticism, there's a lot of things happening that aren't necessarily something that I have to call, like, child protective services about. It's just a crappy home life, and
Right.
the only thing that I can really do at those times is really just empowering them, lifting them up, and being the adult that loves them no matter what. It's just like, "Hey, I'm here for you." So basically, yeah, it's not having a magic wand. It's not being able to take all the pain away, because I can't take all the pain away. And I think in my career, um, even the very beginning of my school social work career, that was a really hard pill to swallow, was that I couldn't just solve everything, that I saw so many things happening with people, with individuals, and so much hurt and pain. And it's very hard sometimes not to be able to like just solve it right away. Um, Over time, I've had to accept what's within my control, what's outside of my control, and the things that I can do. Like I tell other people that I mentor, who I talk to, who are new to the field, I just tell them sometimes the best thing you can do is plant seeds and empower them to make better decisions, empower them to break patterns.
Yeah. We can't force change. You just kind of have to nurture it, plant the seeds and help support its growth.
Yeah.
So, how do you decompress to avoid compassion fatigue and really getting caught up in a spiral of all the tough situations you have to see and experience and help people navigate through?
That is such a good question. And I've developed some things over time. I've had to. I burned out a couple of times in my field. And number one, I protect my time and my space.
Mhm.
I surround myself with people who lift me up. They don't tear me down. I'm very, very particular about who comes into my inner space. And I'm very particular. I try to be very particular about the content that I see online. I'm not always good about that. Sometimes, I admit it, I doom scroll. I mean, who
Right. Yeah.
doesn't?
Yeah.
Who doesn't? But
Oh, I know I do. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I do it. I'll be the first to admit it because I'm not perfect. But I set boundaries. I think first and foremost, I set boundaries and I say no. I say no to things that don't serve me. I try to say no to things that just take away rather than add. And I think among those other things, like I spend time with my cat. His name is Stan Lee. He's such a good
Nice.
emotion regulator.
Shout out for
I
Stanley.
Yeah. I talk to friends. I talk it out with people that I trust. I exercise. I'm a regular gym goer. I like to lift. I like to do cardio. Um, and sometimes, like, if I'm having really, really negative emotions that are intense, I'll even do some of the DBT exercises that I teach people. And DBT means dialectical behavioral therapy. And it teaches you about regulating really difficult, intense emotions. So if I'm really, really having a time with it, and I'm nearing, like, if I'm having a panic attack, I will grab a couple of ice cubes and just hold it and breathe. And I also like meditate. I do yoga. Um, I mean, deep breathing is such a powerful and overlooked way of regulating our nervous system. So I actually do a lot of things that I teach.
Those are all wonderful, wonderful suggestions that we all can follow. You mentioned the doom scrolling, and I know that I do way too much of that. I feel much a sense of wanting to be aware and speak out against certain things, but I
Yeah.
know that I get way too wrapped up into it to the point where, inciting that anger within yourself
Mhm.
is very addictive. It's very much something that it almost is. As much as I love art and comedy and all sorts of different things, I'd much rather scroll almost the darkest places for no reason because I know what I'm going to see. I know it's going to make me enraged about the chaos and the confusion that's going on, and it's hard to look away. So,
Yeah.
what steps do you suggest for looking away when it seems like it's so urgent? It's so, oh, I need to know and I need to speak on this and I need to help in any way I could possibly help to make the world a better place. That we get so wrapped up into it. How do we pull ourselves away?
Excellent question. You're speaking to somebody who has a very, very strong sense of justice. It's why I didn't just do like a master's in counseling. I got my master of social work because it has a social justice component. That's a big definitive difference between the different counseling disciplines. So yes, I feel that. I feel that a
Yeah.
lot. So I think the thing is I think it's okay to allow yourself to step back because we can get way too wrapped up in what we see. We can get way too involved, way too angry. And on the other end of the keyboard, we may not have a rational person that we'll be able to have like actual discourse with. We have to
Right.
remember that we're not going to change everybody's minds. We're not going to get them to like our side of the argument. And so I think it's okay to give us permission to take a step back, especially if you feel like you're starting to just really feel the weight of the world on your shoulders. We have to protect ourselves first. And everything that's out there isn't good. Like human beings, we weren't meant to see all of the things happening around the world all at once at the click of a button. Our brains have our brains aren't used to processing that information all at once, and it's a lot. And I think that's a big part of why our society is overwhelmed and unkind with each other online because our brains aren't used to it. Like, like evolution didn't like take us here. And and I think it's okay. Like it's like if you know where you stand on certain matters that are important to you, you don't need to consume the news surrounding it 24/7.
Right.
It's okay to step back for a little bit, kind of feel where you are, and then dip your toes back in. But remember, like online discourse is extremely difficult to do because
Mhm.
because that lack of this person being right in front of you is a huge factor. You forget that there's another human being who's a son, a daughter, a mother, a father, niece, nephew. You forget that they're on the other side of that screen.
Mhm.
And it's just so easy to do. And I think it would be a little different if we were able to have these types of conversations in person, but a lot of what we do is online.
Mhm. Well, we can't be everywhere all at once, but we can see everything all at once, it seems.
Yeah.
You know? And we have to realize, I think, not only is our own buffer or wall up because of the separation of communicating online, so is the other person. So there's two walls we're trying to break through to actually have
Mhm.
discourse, and it's nearly impossible. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So do you have a short DBT exercise that you might be able to take us all through that would be appropriate?
What sort of situation are you thinking about? Because there's a lot of them, and it depends on the degree to which you're needing to regulate your nervous system.
Okay. Maybe just a basic, very lower level, not someone who's experiencing a panic attack, but someone who's just starting to feel their anxiety rise a little
So, if we're specifically using DBT, and just know that I'm not an expert in DBT, I just use many of the concepts of DBT, and nor am I certified, but I do use a lot of the concepts in my work with others. A thing that you can do if you're not quite at the level of a panic attack where you need such an immediate acute response to an emotional reaction is I would say that what you could do if you feel your anxiety rising, allowing yourself to slow down and take a step back. And then maybe doing something that integrates senses in a very soothing way. Using something tactile like a soft, fuzzy blanket, an aromatic, warm cup of tea that's relaxing. Um, like communing with nature, like taking a walk in nature, getting out there, getting some sunshine, get some air, get some fresh air, change your scenery. We underestimate the power of changing our scenery.
Right.
And, just, those are self-soothing techniques, things that just bring it down just a little bit more.
Yeah, all things that compel us to be present,
Mhm.
to be
Yes.
grounded within our body and our physical experience, to kind of get out of the mind a little bit. That's really, really great advice. Thank you for that. Now, I ask a version of this question to everyone that comes on for an interview.
Mhm.
With the chaos we witness and experience daily in the world, if you could give all of humanity a message, what would your personal message be?
I think we really need to start being kinder to each other and coming back to our empathy, because I know we talked a little bit about neurodiversity, but it's just, we're all here. We're all in it together. We really are. And I know that that's been talked about a lot over the past, 6 years. But I would say my advice to everybody would be just let's embrace our differences, no matter our color, where we came from or originated from, where we're at, where we're going, if we have a home to go to, if we don't, if we're struggling with some sort of addiction or not, that I think it's really important for us to embrace in the many, many ways that we show up as humans.
I like that. The many, many ways we show up as humans.
Yeah.
We're all unique and we all show up in a different way. It
Yeah.
can be messy and it can be beautiful. It can be graceful. It can be clumsy. It can be scary. It can be peaceful. But we all show up in so many different ways and from day to day. I think that's important to realize. Well, thank you very much for a wonderful interview, an enlightening interview. I'm really grateful that you joined us today.
Thank you so much, Rob, for having me. This has been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Well, good. I'm glad it was. It was for me as well. Thank you.
Breathe in, breathe out. Allow yourself to let go and transform that anxious bitch face into resting bitch face.